Provides solutions to complex heavy civil infrastructure challenges in Texas, Arizona, and across the southwestern United States. There's over 1,200 employees. They're 1.2 billion in yearly revenue and 2.5 billion in backlog. What's really cool with all this is because of the size of the company, there's tons of opportunity even just within the equipment department. So a little bit about me. I don't have too much on my about me because I just graduated from university 2 years ago. I actually studied manufacturing engineering. I worked in interned in aerospace and nuclear before I came here. I never in a million years imagined I would be working in heavy civil, let alone equipment. I didn't know that was a career field to begin with. It was never something that crossed my mind. But now that I've been here, it's something that's been incredible. I've been able to experience and see things I never thought possible, and it's something I would not change for anything. So at police, we have about 1,200 trucks, trailer, and yellow iron. This includes some specialty equipment, which is really cool. So think batch plants, pavers, and crushers. What's been really cool is working at police, we have the opportunity to work hands-on with something like the crusher. With the batch plants, I've been able to see those in operations. I've been able to climb on them, and it's really cool to have a fleet of that size to work with. Our equipment is both owned and leased, and where that's not applicable, whether it's a short term or we don't have something to supplement it, we give it a rental. So in the equipment world, there's a lot of different careers and what you can work with. Some of those include mechanics, equipment engineers, equipment superintendents, project equipment managers, operations managers, equipment managers / vice president, and the equipment director. A lot of companies may have slightly different names for the same roles. The roles kind of overlap depending on the size of the company. Maybe some are more centralized or more project-based. But one thing that's cool is there's, again, a lot of opportunity just within the equipment world and the equipment department. So as an equipment engineer, which is what I do, we work a lot with the mechanics, boilers, and superintendents to ensure all the day-to-day parts and materials are ordered. We generate a lot of reports for management. We ensure that all scheduled repairs are on track and keep job teams up to date on changes. Another big thing is we request rentals and coordinate job needs and ensure that there's an accurate equipment schedule in place. That's something that's very important, is having an accurate equipment schedule, because otherwise you're going to just be requesting rentals all over the place and your budget is just going to shoot through the roof and you have no idea where that went. Then there's an equipment superintendent, and they are generally in charge of the mechanics, the boilers, and the engineers. A lot of times they're more knowledgeable and technical on the machines, so they know how to actually fix those machines. They've been in the field for a while, they understand what's going on, and they ensure that everything gets done, that we have very low downtime. They understand where our costs are going, what's going on, and at the end of the day, they make a lot of those on-the-fly decisions that they are able to make because of the knowledge that they've accumulated over time. Then you can run into an equipment manager. So they'll oversee the superintendents and engineers to ensure that the work gets complete. They're usually dealing with a lot more of the financial side. So where a superintendent and engineer is dealing more day-to-day stuff, making sure equipment stays up, these people are dealing more of the financial, what needs to get done. They'll understand the cost of the operations and making sure that projects stay on budget. And they generally oversee many or multiple equipment superintendents. They generally have more experience, so 8+ years. Then you get into upper management, so think equipment director. They make the final financial decisions at the higher level of the company, so they ensure that the equipment department's helping meet the company's needs. They're not really involved with the day-to-day stuff. They focus on strategies, so whether we replace our fleet with new stuff, modernize it, acquisitions, and a lot of the financial stuff. Any questions on the careers in equipment? I don't have too much experience in that because I'm still kind of lower on the rung, but if anyone has any questions, I can try to answer them.
So one of the things as it relates to just managing the equipment, right, guys, you heard about all those different positions who are a part of the decision-making process to determine, right, am I going to rent, am I going to buy, am I going to lease a piece of equipment, and how that impacts the bottom line of the company, right? I again, you guys can make careers out of just knowing how this equipment works, how much it costs, what's the production, how much does it cost to ship it across state lines, interstate. Again, there's levels to it. So again, in Abe, again, one of those things that they're going through with this merger, right? I mean, it's just telling me about it. Is how it is that you just manage the equipment that you have in your inventory, right? What about when you manage, you have a whole other company that you acquired. I don't know, Abe, if you want to maybe highlight a little bit of that, just how that is created and.
It's a messy process overall, but I mean, in the grand scheme of it, it just takes, you gotta rely on people that you work with, or people that work for you, making sure that they're in the loop on things. You gotta make sure you're, constant communication, like, I probably see, 300-400 emails throughout the day, probably 30, 40, 50 phone calls, sometimes within an hour, so it's like a constant upkeep. Obviously relying on, like I said, relying on your guys, making sure that they're in the loop, that they're communicating back with you, back to you on anything that they've got going on. Obviously, when you start getting higher up in a company, you lose out on, like Ben said, the day-to-day stuff. Trust me, you don't want the day-to-day stuff on top of the other stuff that you've got going on, so you gotta make sure that you're teaching your guys, you're explaining things to them. One of my biggest things is, that from a manager standpoint, this should be every manager, but a lot of the times, the industry standard or just any management role in general, whether it's construction or anything else, a lot of the times people try to keep things not in your purview because they don't think that you're not responsible, but you need to know type of deal. I find that as a big drawback. Obviously, you want to make sure that your guys aren't too much involved with everything because they've got stuff that they've got to focus on. But you got to make sure you guys close the loop. So make sure that they understand why they're generating a report, why they're doing what they're doing, because at the end of the day, that affects their performance, right? If they know that, hey, at the end of the day, the data is being used for whatever, in the grand scheme of it, they can put some more effort towards it. They understand why we're doing what we're doing. And so a lot of the times, just informing them on a 5-second conversation, like, hey, this report's going to be used by the project teams for this. They understand, okay, the information I'm generating is being used for X, Y, Z, and it's not just another report that sits in someone's inbox. It's not just a task that, we're trying to be busy with. So it's just relying on your guys heavily, constant communication, and that will get into the weeds of some of it, but, there's a lot of tools nowadays out there that help a lot with that. And it's, now we're in a day and age where you guys are in school, you guys probably know more about technology than all of us do, but technology is huge. And so lean on it, rely on it, learn it, because when you get out into the real world, especially if you go to a company that's very advanced in technology, the expectation is you already know about it, right? So you're supposed to use that information to help you be better, and there's a lot of things that me and Ben use day in and day out that I think a few years ago we didn't know anything about, but it's small things that help us be more productive and be able to manage everyone.
Yeah, so we're gonna briefly go over some of the equipment types and kind of what we have at police, and then he was talking about the data, and we're gonna dive more into that and some of the technology and modern processes that we've been using at police to help not fall behind and get caught up and be leading in this industry. So in construction, there are various categories in construction equipment. We got earth moving, cranes, paving. Within paving, there's asphalt and concrete, tunneling, mining, and support equipment. So the biggest one is earth moving. Earth moving equipment is used all the time. It's the first stage of construction as they move earth to prepare sites for development. Larger doesn't always mean better. What do you think I mean by that when I say larger doesn't always mean better?
Everything has a specific purpose?
Exactly. I know recently we had a request for an equipment. It was a roller, and it had to be a specific width because it had to fit between 2 pillars. If we get them a roller that's too big, it's not going to fit where it needs to go. Another big thing is get an excavator that's 3 times the size of what they need. That costs a lot more to operate. It costs more to rent or to lease. It costs more to operate hourly. So it's very important not to always just shoot from the hip and get something that's larger than what they need just because you think that. So some of these equipment that consists are dozers, loaders, excavators, articulated trucks, rollers, skid steers, motor graders, and backhoes. So really, anything that's used to move that earth, to move that dirt, to get it ready for the next steps in construction. Then we got cranes. There are various types of cranes. We got rough terrain, crawlers, telescopic, Taller and all-terrain. I know the rough terrain cranes are something we use all the time at police. They're kind of the backbone of our lifting. All the time we have the need for cranes and to use them. One thing with cranes is it's very important to keep them up on their annual inspections to make sure that they are safe to operate, because if there's an accident with a crane, that can go very bad because they're lifting a lot of weight. We go into paving. With paving, there's two different categories with paving. There's concrete and asphalt. Paving is always something that's really cool. I remember I had just started working at police and the Broadway curve was in full swing. So probably about a month in, and my boss at the time's like, oh yeah, you should go out there. So I go out there one morning at 2 a.m. and they're doing a bridge deck pour. And next thing I know, I find myself on top of just a bridge deck paver and they're explaining to me how everything works. So sometimes you may think that it's just one machine, but every application within paving has a specific machine for that. What you use for a bridge is not what you're going to use for a road. Asphalt and concrete are very different processes. And then there's tunneling. Tunneling, there's specific machines, TBMs, that are used to bore the tunnels as well as pave in one, or there's the other process where they blast and then pave. It's not gonna work. The video doesn't work, I tried. And then there's mining. So in mining, you got like mine trucks, shovels, dozers, motor graders, loaders, drills, and much more. One thing with the mining and the equipment in mining is it's much bigger. It's a huge scale compared to what you'll have on the side of a highway. These trucks are massive in comparison to a normal dump truck you have moving equipment. And then you have some support equipment, so think generators, saws, tampers, you got pickup trucks, and really anything that is used to support the operations of the process. Any questions on equipment types? So now we're going to get into kind of data and the future of kind of the data information and construction and any equipment. So at police over the last 2 years, we've really been working towards modernizing and improving our processes, improving where we came from and where we're going, because this world is moving really fast with data, with the AI implementation, with processes that are coming with that. What was important 2 years ago is not important now. The tools we had 2 years ago or 4 years ago are now outdated. So it's always important to keep staying ahead, and that is where data is essential, because regardless of what tools we have, the more data we have, the more we're able to use it. And then we're going to go on one of the big ones, and something that is very important is our telematics. Can anyone here tell me what telematics is in terms of construction equipment? So telematics, it's much more than just seeing the location of your equipment. You'll have a map and you can see where your equipment is, and that's great. But it also shows you things such as fuel. It can show you your fuel information when you're operating, how much fuel you use for idling. It can show you your current fuel levels, and with that, it also shows you your utilization, your idle time, engine hours and vehicle miles, asset history, asset status. So we're thinking, if the machine's on, if it's off. You can see loads on some of the newer machines, idle times, running, all of that can be seen. Also in a lot of them, what's really cool is you can see fault codes. So when fault codes are being thrown on a machine, we're able to see it right away. We don't have to hope that an operator is going to report, hey, my machine's screaming at me, and eventually it makes it back to the superintendent, who eventually sends a mechanic out there to look at it. No, we're able to see that right away through the telematics, and also we're able to see some safety events. So we're going to go a little bit more into some of these categories. But first, I'm going to talk about why it's important, why it's essential to have this. One of the big things is, first with that is, the location of that helps us recover stolen and lost assets. Again, I had an experience when I first started where I was 2 weeks or 3 weeks in, I had no idea what I was looking at, but I saw this trailer on our map sitting in a Bass Pro parking lot. It's like, what the heck is this? So I had the bright idea to just drive by and, look at it. Turns out it was a mini excavator that we had reported stolen months earlier. And we were able to recover that through this telematics. It also helps when it's important to decide when the project needs to add or move equipment from their project. Sometimes you'll have foremen, superintendents, people requesting equipment left and right. Everyone wants their own excavator, but it's only being used for a few hours, or there's one over here that's not being used. So it's really helpful in understanding the needs for the projects. It applies to decisions of whether we want to rent, buy, or lease an equipment. It helps us with scheduling out our mechanics. Again, we have that understanding of alerts and fault codes and all of that before we even get to the machine. We already have a general idea of what might be going wrong. So we save a ton of time there by being able to send our mechanics out with more knowledge of errors. We're also able to catch a machine before it breaks down by knowing these fault codes. Environmental reporting. As the world moves on, you'll notice one big thing is the environment, and a lot of companies are going to have some sort of requirement to report your fuel consumption, to report your usage, your CO2, whatever it might be. They'll have some sort of environmental reporting, and it's very important we have that and have that information for when they ask for it. And a lot of that can be found within this telematics. And then also locating assets for purposes such as billing or equipment scheduling. When you have 1,200 to 1,700 assets and a team of 10 people managing them, sometimes it can be a little hard to know where everything's moving around and where stuff is, because stuff needs to happen day of. You don't want to stop the operation. So we're able to much more understand where our equipment is and how it's being used. And there are many, many decisions that are made based off of our understanding of telematics. So in telematics in the world, a lot of new equipment will have OEM telematics. A lot of new equipment already has it built into the machine. Caterpillar and John Deere are really good at that. And most of the time, and all the time, that the telematics from the machine, from the factory, is going to provide you with a lot more information than if you put a device on it. Some of these, like CAT, we have our Vision Links. All of our CAT equipment we're able to see and manage within Vision Link. John Deere and Working equipment, we're able to manage in JD Link or JD Op Center, and LeBaire has their own portal. So a lot of these equipment, as we're moving forward, you'll see are providing you with more and more of this information. So it's up to us to know how to use it. It's up to us to know what to do with it, because it's all there at our fingertips. All the new equipment we get is given to us. So we'll take a look. It's kind of like Vision Link. We're able to see in live time utilization. We're able to see a timeline of the equipment, what's going on, when it was turned off, if the operator's seatbelt was not on. All of that stuff is information that we have at our disposal, as well as the location, which is a lot more. In JD Op Center, it's very similar in terms of the data we get, but it's a different interface. It looks different. But if you know where to look, you know what you're looking for, it's all in there. And then we have third-party telematics. So at Police, we have made a huge push over the last couple of years to ensure that all of our equipment has telematics, whether it be from OEM, whether it be from a third party like Samsara, which is what we use. And in Samsara, it's important to know that not all telematics are created equal. Some devices are specifically meant for trailers, and you're able to track trailers. But a trailer doesn't have an engine, so you're not going to get utilization hours from a trailer. They also have little tags that are like air tags that we can track high value assets. So things, surveying equipment and GPS, we're able to track that stuff and know its location, as well as they have devices for excavators, for heavy equipment that will give us all the information we need. But again, the OEM information will almost always give you not only more, but better. There are cases where when we first started, we were wiring in the telematics and it was causing the machine to throw errors. And that's a problem. So that's why when we can, we always revert to OEM. Any questions so far? And then we'll talk about rentals. So When we have 1,200 owned assets, it's really easy to either have OEM and have access to that, or put our own telematics on it. But what about when you have 500 rentals and you still want to know your utilization? You still want to know where your rental is or something's going wrong with it. So that's something that more and more rental vendors have been providing that information. And as you build these relationships with them, and we've been working with them to help ensure that we are able to understand what is going on with our rental fleet as well as we are with our own fleet. So just because it is a rental, it doesn't limit us with that ability to have those telematics, to have that information. Now, in a lot of cases, this does throw another website or another software, another system that we have to go to get that information. In some of the smaller rental outfits, maybe they'll only send you an Excel of the utilization from the last week. So sometimes you have to work through that. So now we have all this information, we have all this telematics from a bunch of different sources, and it's really cool to see. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'll use that, but sometimes, get a little overwhelming, right? Get a little confusing when you aren't sure exactly what you're looking at, because it's not always going to scream at you, look at this one, look at this one. Yeah, it is when there's a fault code, that's a major issue, and you'll see that. But what about all this other information? How do you use it? So this is where we're going to talk a lot about, some software API integration. Talk about AI and how we are using that to leverage the data, to leverage this information that we gather from many different sources. So as we just saw that there are many locations where this data is stored, many ways that we get this data, and it's great to have this information, but how do we use it? And that's where our APIs come in, and it's a key. An API is just a key that allows us to pull and push data from one system to another system. It lets us take all of it and consume it into one place instead of having to manually or physically ourselves go to separate locations. Any questions on APIs and how that works? Okay, so we'll go on to the next one. Another tool that we use, and this is in Microsoft Suite, is Power Automate in some of the reports. So there are remote file servers that some of these companies upload to, and we're able to write automated scripts to pull those files, turn them into Excel, and send them out, or turn them into a format that you need. So we write these scripts, they either pull from the API or pull from these sources to give us the data in a format that we want it to be. And then one of the biggest new, a big software that we have been using, and that's helped revolutionize how we see our information and how we keep everything, is Clue Construction Management. Clue is an application that we use. It helps consolidate all our data into one place. It helps keep it in a single pane of glass and have everything at our fingertips. It is developed and designed to help operators. There's an app specifically for operators to do what they need to do, as well as a website for the engineers and the management to see stuff on our end. It gives us the track equipment location. So all of those, JD Link, Vision Link, Liebherr, the rental vendors, all of those companies have their own portals and they work great. They look great, but they're all separate. Our CAT equipment's in CAT, our JD equipment is in John Deere, and Liebherr's in Liebherr, our rentals are in the rental portals. What are we supposed to do every single week? Download Excels from all of them and consolidate it. And that's where this comes in. If you need to look for any location of equipment, the API feeds it all directly into the software and allows us to see all of that in one place. And I'll show you that in a second. It also allows us to plan out repairs and assign work orders to mechanics. It manages our mechanics time cards, so we're able to know where our equipment is, assign work orders to mechanics, and they do all their time cards all in one place. It allows us to do our equipment requests and our call-offs. So in the past, we would have people calling or emailing or talking to someone saying, hey, I need this equipment. They send an email. Hopefully someone catches the email and we get it, or hey, we're done with this. And then next thing we know, an equipment was called off. They didn't want this rental 3 weeks ago. They still have it on right because it got lost in someone's email or it was from a phone call that got forgotten. So all that can be done in here. We're also able to dispatch and do our equipment planning. So when equipment moves around, we're able to track and do all that trucking all within this software. And we also do our fleet financials, so total cost of ownership. Because all our work orders and our time cards and all that is within this one software, we're able to see that, and we'll go into that more in a second. Then there's a lot of cool reports. You can think if all our data is in one place, all the reports that we can pull just from that. All those fault codes are in there. And then equipment inspections. This is a big one. Equipment is required to be inspected every morning. OSHA, or before operation, OSHA requires the operators to inspect their equipment. That's important, and that's done through this app. If something goes wrong, OSHA is probably going to request for those records, so it's very important that we have those. We can get those in here, as well as PM planning, and then we have our asset list, and much more is all within this one application. So we'll go into a few of the features, a little more detail. So when we have equipment tracking, it's great. Now, no longer are the days where you're trying to remember which system your equipment is in. Oh, do I need to look in Vision Link for this one? Oh, do I need to look in JD Op Center or Samsara? Gone are those days. We're able to search every equipment, every pickup truck, everything within one software in one place. So it helps us understand where things are doing, and ultimately it just leads to time savings without having to jump around and less room for error. And then the one I talked about a little bit is that mechanics planning and work orders. So this is one of the biggest PowerPoints or power strengths by having everything in one place. We are able to not only plan out our mechanics, understand it, we can take those inspections, we can take those fault codes, we can take whatever the data is giving us that needs a mechanic to work on it and send it directly to them. If someone reports an issue in an inspection, they take a picture of the issue and show us. An engineer can already have the parts ordered and sent out and ready for the mechanic before he even goes out to the equipment. That saves the whole trip. It saves the mechanic having to go out to equipment, see, oh, this is broken or this or that. Then he comes back, we order the part, maybe we can get it that same day, maybe it takes another day or two. And then it saves a ton of time just within that. If it's the same with the fault code, we'll get a fault code way before an operator tells us something's wrong with the machine, or way before we have a preventative maintenance due on the machine and our oiler realizes something's wrong with it, so we can get them out there. That greatly reduces downtime of our equipment and ultimately leads to savings, because it's cheaper to fix the machine than if the machine breaks down and we have to get going on it. And then ultimately it also helps us understand the true cost. By having this all in one place, we're no longer trying to pull, oh, our operating costs was X amount of dollars divided by X amount of equipment, and you kind of just assign a general number to that cost. We understand how much each equipment costs, how those costs relate to the equipment, whether it's because this job is causing a lot of damage or this excavator generally has a lot of repairs at this hour. We're able to understand all of that in one place. That's one of the biggest strengths and strong points that we have with Include.
Can you only use that for newer pieces of equipment?
No, so all of our equipment. So for older equipment, we will put a Samsara device on it, and that's what will allow us, as long as it has a computer that can speak to it, we're able to get that information. And generally, we don't have too many equipment that's older that we don't have that information from.
Does that software even spit out a recommendation like, hey, sell this piece of equipment?
This is something that Flu's been working on with AI push and everything, right? The great thing behind Flu, and this is not a sales pitch by any stretch, it doesn't influence you guys, but they're one of the only companies out there that are constantly developing. I mean, we signed on to them about a year and a half ago, and me and Ben till today have weekly meetings with their production team and their support team on what we're running into, what issues, what things we need improvements on, things of that nature. So they're constantly improving in this application. One of the big pushes that they're working on is implementing and creating their own AI that solely deals with anything Include. So one of the big things that they're working on with their next push is, now that they already have fleet financial statements, so you're uploading your finances based on whatever you've got going on, they're actually coming up with basically checks that say, hey, you know, you're only putting 3,000 hours a year on this piece of equipment, but it's costing you so much every year. And whether it's operating expenses, whether it's repairs, whether it's whatever the case may be, and it'll actually advise you like, hey, I think you're getting to the point where it's not beneficial for you to hold this piece of equipment. But at the same time, again, all these tools are there at your fingertips, but they're not your sole, kind of execution, right? They're not, it's not the thing that, oh, it tells us to sell it, let's get rid of it. There's other factors that come into play that you, going through the experience and the years of understanding how equipment operates and works, you'll get to a point where you'll be able to, like Ben said, because we're able to dictate whether something is caused by damage on the project, you know, that stuff does end up in the fleet financials to say, okay, you have unexpected costs, right, like a lot, and you can understand, okay, how much of that is actually job costs, where the job is damaging all this equipment, and how much of it is actually the true operating cost, right? The cost for you to turn that piece of equipment on and put it in the ground. So it allows you to understand it all. These are all things that, you know, we're constantly pushing for to Blue, like, hey, we want this, we want that, and they're constantly receiving that. And so, you know, the feedback and communication is two-way, and you're not gonna get that from most companies out there because they're in it for, hey, we sold you an application, you do what you see fit for your application, and that's kind of the gist of it. They might release a few updates here and there, but I mean, I think since we came on board, I think they've had over 2,000 kind of, even if it's a small update, they've had over 2,000.
And one thing with that, and it's important to note, is no matter how powerful the software is or how much the AI is giving you information, it's only good as the information you feed into it and the upkeep you give to it. So a system can be perfect, the computer can be perfect, but if you're not taking the time to upkeep it, taking the time to make sure the information in there is accurate and correct, then what the AI is going to tell you is garbage. And that is something that's very important to know. And another big thing, speaking of that, is, you know, our asset list. That's kind of, you know, our backbone. Every single thing that happens, equipment moves, the work orders, the costs, all that is assigned to an asset or a unique ID. So it's important that you have that list, and that list is up to date, and that list is accurate, because if you have an equipment and you say it's in Arizona, but it's actually in Texas, and then your mechanics are assigning time to it and costs, and then you ask your AI, hey, how much is the equipment costing on this project? It's a mess, and that's just one. When you have 1,700 equipment and you miss 3 a week, by the end of the year, you have 150 of your equipment, 10% of your fleet is all sorts of messed up. So it's very easy to get lost in how good the software is working and to forget about the details, and forget it and focus on the little day-to-day things that make the AI, that make the software work, and make the data that you're given get good information. Any questions on the Clue software, what it can do, or how it can help out in construction and equipment management?
Do you know any other companies that are using this software?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of companies, and they've been taking on more and more. Some of the big ones, Walsh is using it. Sunk was initially using it, but this is something, like Ben said, it's only as good as the information you provide to it. So it's why we have someone like Ben who this is kind of his baby child, and he's pushing hard into it because you can see the results coming out of it. And I don't think they put in that effort that was needed to get that going. There's a lot of smaller companies, smaller, when I say smaller, they're not a police or fire and regardless of magnitude, but a local company that some of you might be familiar with is Rummel Construction. They're using it. So that there's a lot out there that, again, we're getting into the day and age where the old pen and paper, and when I started, we had in a project office in a 20-foot Connex, there was whiteboards all over the wall, and that's how you did your scheduling, your planning, your meeting. I mean, everything was on a whiteboard. And so nowadays, day and age, everyone needs to be able to leverage that data for future reference, and so it becomes very difficult. And so a lot of companies are starting to kind of get into the game of AI and trying to capture as much data, because not only are we using this for day in and day out, and we're also using it for tracking on building and this and that, but in the grand scheme of it, company is only as strong as the data that they have from previous history. So you go to get a project that is very similar to a job that you might have done 5 years ago, you have the data that supports it. Hey, we built that project with 10 excavators, 2 dozers, whatever the case may be. This was the equipment spread. We have the data based on how much utilization they put on it, how much production they might have done if you're capturing that information. All that can come into play, and you can really put together a bid on a project that is damn near perfect. Obviously, you'll have to account for changes in inflation, changes in whatever cost of operating, fuel consumption, things of that, but all the hard data for how much something is costing you, how much you spend, that's all historical stuff, and you can get pretty accurate if you have the data to support it. And that's why some of the largest companies that you might go work for, they've been using data and leveraging data for ages. I mean, you talk to people from Walsh, people from Hewitt, people from whoever, right? They've been manually gathering data. It hasn't been as streamlined as it is, but they've been manually gathering data for 20 plus years. And that's how they're able to go out and put a bid on a project, feeling confident enough that, hey, we didn't just lose all of our money on a project that we haven't even started yet. So
Yeah, and one thing, with Clue, it doesn't happen overnight. The data we fed into it didn't appear out of nowhere. There are things that led up to Clue. One of the softwares that we used before Clue, and we still use to this day, is Smartsheet. Smartsheet is a very powerful tool. It takes a lot of the strengths of Excel, but it allows collaboration. I know when I first started, everyone in the equipment department had their own equipment master. They had it on their computer, and once a week it maybe got updated. Maybe they downloaded the new one. Maybe 3 or 4 equipment was wrong on one person, and 3 or 4 on the other is wrong on the others. And it very quickly kind of gets out of control. Because when you're a company that is one equipment department with 3 projects and they're all in the valley, it's relatively easy to manage that. But as you grow, as you get bigger, as you go across state lines and your projects are 10 hours apart and you're not on every project every week, counting every equipment, it's very important that that collaboration is done and that everyone's working off of the same information. And that's where Smartsheet came in. It allowed us to kind of move towards this modern age of moving out of PDFs, moving out of paper or phone calls and emails for equipment requests, and allowed us to create forms for equipment requests. It allowed us to move out of purchase order numbers being a sheet of paper to purchase order numbers being auto-generated. And all that was done through the Smartsheet, which has been very helpful. And even to this day, we still use it to store a lot of our data. We use it for some of our transport, as our transport drivers are able to access dashboards from within Smartsheet and so much more. So it's been really helpful, and it was a really good stepping stone into understanding and using our data. And still to this day, it's very helpful. Any questions on Smartsheet or on Clue or anything I've talked about so far? Cool. So now, one of the new tools and new things that we're using at police and relatively recently is Power BI. So Power BI is revolutionizing the way that we're able to present this data and able to understand this data. Through the legwork and the groundwork that's been done, we have all the data acquired and we know what it is. Power BI allows us to visualize that data and present it in a way that is clean, that is usable, that is someone's able to understand. Because I don't know about you, when you have an Excel sheet with 1,600, 1,700, 10,000 rows, it's kind of hard to know what's going on without cleaning it up. Sometimes in Excel it can take time, especially if you have to do that over and over again. This is where Power BI comes in and is very powerful. One great example, comes as our utilization and utilization reports. In the past, we would send out a list and it would show, equipment, how much it was used, and maybe an average job utilization. And we would do that every week. But now we're able to send out, now everyone has access, we'll have access to a live report that shows that utilization. And we're able to know what is going on. You're able to compare utilization against projects. You're able to compare it against equipment types, excavators versus dozers or projects using this. You're able to have all that in one place and ultimately understand more accurate costs from that utilization. And that's just one example of how Power BI is changing it. So here are some pictures of some of the things that we have set up in Power BI. So we have, the utilization like I was talking about. We can have open work orders and all this information being pulled live and directly from Clue and from any other systems that we've had those APIs from. And we also build like equipment schedules, knowing what equipment are at jobs and in a cleaner way. So sometimes project managers not going to want to dig through, Clue to see their equipment schedule and know what's going on. But if they have quick access to a Power BI or a dashboard that shows exactly what's going on and it's easy to filter, they're a lot more likely to use it and understand what is going on. Data, any questions on Power BI or on the tools that we've been using to understand this data?
Just by show of hands, how many of you have used Power BI at all?
So just for information, Power BI on any company, whether small or big, is the next big push for almost every company. I mean, I'm sure they probably use it just internal on the back end. So like this information is something that you'll probably see a lot more than you will in the Excel world going forward. Only because, like Ben said, it's something that's live, it's something that can be updated very easily. It's hard to break necessarily because everything is functioning on the back end. But project managers, everyone's busy. Every person that's on a construction project is busy. They are taxed, they are put to their limits. And one less thing that they can do, pull a report from a website, sift through Excel, put their own filters on something. Those are all things that back then used to be the norm, but it was something that took more time out of the day. Power BI allows it to be something that within 1 to 2 buttons on average, they're able to quickly see what's going on. Like all the boxes you see on the top there, those are what they call the quick filters. If they click on a box, it'll basically filter their data to just whatever's in that box. Same thing with like equipment schedules. I'm sure they go in pretty depth on scheduling in your guys' course load throughout the years. Scheduling is something that if you go onto a project and they don't have a schedule in place, you're probably at the wrong job. Because they probably don't understand what is going on out there. They probably don't have an idea as to costs. And something Ben didn't really touch on is equipment is a massive cost on the project. You're not talking, you might have a project that's a $200-300 million job. Half of that could be equipment costs. So, equipment's a big deal in the grand scheme of it, and some people don't put the emphasis in understanding that equipment cost and how much it actually impacts the project. But you get down to the last, year of the job, and all of a sudden, the whole project went upside down. And it's like, what happened, right? And one of the big things that a lot of people come to find out is, hey, we didn't have a good grasp on our equipment and our schedule and our production. And at the end of the day, they might be upside down on that job and they might lose money on that project. And it was solely because someone lost track of how much they were actually spending in the equipment department. So, all these things are tools. Right? They're tools to arm you and gear you towards trying to be that next best person in the company. Trying to understand, hey, this is something that you guys can take back to whatever, if you're an intern currently, or you're graduating and becoming, an engineer or whatever the case may be. These are tools that, hey, if you're working for a company and they don't have that equipment schedule in place, maybe that's something you bring up to them and say, hey, and it can start off with something very simple, something in Excel, right, on a project level base, and say, hey, we need to have an equipment schedule in place to understand what equipment we have on the job, as well as what it's costing us. Because, like I said, you change the date on one of those and push it back a year, and something that you were making money on could really turn you into a red rail.
And real quick, one thing that I'll just add in that is real nice about RBI that you guys should get familiar with is that it's a really good way to represent data to folks who aren't intimately involved on your project. So right, when an owner comes in and wants to know why the hell have you spent so much money? What about these change orders that you keep writing? You want a quick and easy way to show how those costs or those changes have impacted your project in a quick snapshot without already dealing with the stress of the question itself. Power BI is a great tool for that. And so again, like Ed was saying, the use of filters and the use of you being able to pinpoint what information you're looking for, not just for yourself, but so that you can convey that to others on the project team so that you can continue to move the needle. So let's get familiar with it, guys. That's all.
When you're kind of like working with other companies, you know, whether it be like subcontractors or maybe it's like a joint venture in that specific job, how do you communicate that information to other companies who might not be like at the same level you guys are with all this kind of software and like data management?
Yeah, so one thing that's very important, and again, this is where Power BI, you can share specific views or filtered views of your data to people. You can share it whether it be even within Smartsheet. You can set these filters to be public, so you can share a link, and I can see that link, or to specific users, because yeah, that's exactly a big purpose of why you want to have something in place that you can filter easily, because not everyone has the same infrastructure that you have, and not everyone has the same understanding as you have of the data. That kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
One thing that I kind of want to point on, and like you'll probably experience at some point in your career is, at least I've experienced a lot, is every company, you know, there's that Excel sheet that they have, that they've had forever, that will have equations that are a million long, and the person who created it is gone with the company and something's locked. And that is something that, you know, you're trying to get away from, because that limits your ability to do your job when you don't know what's going on. And that's where Power BI comes in a lot of strength. That's where all of these tools that we've talked about come in a lot of strength. It's no longer this intimate, confusing knowledge that only one person can know or one person needs to know, and when they are no longer around, you're stuck trying to detangle the mess of what they've built. That's something that's really been helpful with these systems in place. So that I guess the next, kind of the last point I want to touch on, a lot is, the importance of this data. We talked a lot about all of this and kind of like why it matters and what's good. Data allows us to make informed action. It allows us to make faster and more cost-effective decisions. At the end of the day, how are you going to tell someone, hey, I need this $100,000 repair on this piece of equipment? Yeah, maybe you do know you need it, but when you have that data to back that up, and you can prove and show why you need this, your management is going to look better on you, it's going to look better on the company, and it's going to make that decision go a lot quicker. You're no longer having those back and forths about why you need this, do I have to have this? You're no longer having the trust and that gut feeling that you have or that intuition that you're able to say, yes, I know this because of this, and present it to the decision makers to make those decisions. It helps reduce costs when you have a lot less idle time. You're able to utilize your equipment better. Like Abe was saying, equipment is expensive, and when you have excessive idle and you have 5 of the same excavators on a job and they are all only being run a little bit, it's because the project team doesn't really understand. They just are like, oh yeah, our foremen are telling us they're running it all day, but in reality they're not. They're able to understand those and reduce those costs. We're able to optimize our management of our fleet. We're able to know when to rent, when to buy, when we should lease equipment, and all of the information that goes into that. We can increase our uptime, so we're able to make sure that we plan ahead on preventative maintenance. We're able to catch fault codes when they happen, not when the machine breaks down. And all of that helps us lead to uptime. We're able to more optimize our mechanics' time, because at the end of the day, their mechanics' time is limited and every equipment is going to have some sort of a problem. So we're able to optimize how to get them out there. We're able to enhance our accountability. So we're able to be more accountable on the equipment department Because sometimes people like to blame the equipment department, or maybe the jobs, we wanna blame the jobs, or something along that information. But we're able to have that accountability and know what's the uses, what's going on, and really what's going on. With that accountability, it also helps our operators. They're doing their inspections. As long as they're doing their inspections, if there's an accident, they're able to show them that protects them and gives them more accountability. Helps support our financial accuracy. As we talked about, there's a lot that goes into the cost of this equipment, and a lot of times all that cost might be taken into a bucket and then distributed out. But now we're able to understand more accurately what is going on, and then it drives continuous improvement. As this world is going on and as things continue to grow and to change, we need to adapt and continue to improve with that. And I guess the last thing I kind of want to talk about is in my day-to-day, how am I using